Hi folks, in today's video I am going to be sharing what happens between getting a quote from Octopus for a heat pump installation all the way through to just before getting it fitted. I'm G3 and I have recently had a heat pump fitted by Octopus, and my journey took almost a year from when I first got a quote from Octopus, and that is partly down to me. I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. In June 2024, I submitted a request for a quotation via the Octopus website. I have to answer a few simple questions like your address, you pop in an email, and that quote came to £2,409.92. And that quote was valid for 30 days. And it was based on the fact that we've got a detached home with mains gas heating, that it was a 4-bedroom property and relatively new build, and so they were anticipating the heat loss to be very low. That's an initial quotation because they have to visit the property to inspect it fully and check on whether there are additional upgrades needed to radiators, location of the water tank and the pump, and things that might contribute to an increased cost. To proceed with that, I would need to pay a £200 deposit, which is fully refundable up to the day before they start the installation. So all through the quotation stage, it is possible to get that money refunded if you don't want to proceed, but it does secure your place in the process going through. The following day after receiving that quotation, I had an email from a heat pump sales specialist that was following up, and they were seeing if I needed any more information. I gave some useful facts about the number of people that liked the service and how much they typically saved on an annual basis, that kind of thing. And off the back of that, I sent an email to them with some additional questions. At that stage, we'd only been in the house for about, I think, 3 months. It was a relatively new property. It wasn't fitted with a heat pump when we moved in, so that was quite disappointing. It was frustrating, but we wanted to get the heat pump fitted in place of the gas boiler. I wanted to try and keep as much of the original tech as possible. So the water tank, which was brand new, I was hoping that I was going to be able to keep that. Thanked them for getting back in touch with me and told them about the particular tank that we had, a Range Tribune XE, which I think was 180 litres from memory. I wanted to know whether that would be suitable for use if we needed to be on a certain tariff, because we were on the tracker tariff at the time, so would we need to change? And also whether they would be responsible for capping off the gas from the property once the gas boiler was out of the way. I got some responses from them the next day, and they said that the heat pump cylinder needs to have an internal coil surface area of 1.5 meters squared or greater, which my current tank didn't have. So it wasn't going to be suitable for heat pump use. Basically, the water is running around the system at a cooler temperature than would be in the gas system. So it needs a bigger surface area to get across the energy into the water to heat it up, compared to the existing one, which had a smaller coil going through but warmer water, which would be able to transfer the energy quicker. It talked about a couple of different possible tariffs, so things like the Cozy Octopus and Agile as possibilities, and also said yes, that they could cap off the gas for me. So I gave it some thought, discussed it with Mrs. G3 to see what she thought, and we were both a little reluctant at that point because of the fact that we would have to change some of the tech, which we didn't really want to because it seemed extremely wasteful to be getting rid of the new equipment. There were things going on around the sort of tail end of last year with energy costs and the like, and it made us look again. And around about mid-December, so the 14th of December, I put in for another quote, and surprisingly it changed quite a bit. It had gone down about £800, and it was now a quotation of £1,645.98. I think the reason being is that they were using new equipment, the Cozy Heat Pump. I think there are additional things they were able to make use of to get that quote down. And it should be noted that obviously with these prices, that includes the fact that there was a £7,500 BUS grant from the government, basically paying for gas boilers to be removed from properties and heat pumps fitted. That seemed a lot more reasonable, and we decided that we would investigate more whether there were things that we could do to make use of the equipment that was coming out, whether we'd be able to recycle it in some way to pass it on. So we thought that we would go ahead with getting the next stages rolling. Again, we had somebody contact us within a couple of days of filling that in. This time it was a senior heat pump sales specialist. The same email, basically, from a different person with the same details, encouraging you to ask any questions if there were any, or if you were happy to proceed, then pay the deposit and proceed. I had a phone call with them to discuss a few questions. So it was things like the process that they used for reusing the equipment, if possible, whether it would be able to be used elsewhere, recycled in some way, usable recycling, and that kind of thing. And they were going to investigate that for me. I had a referral code, which I'd got from my research, watching other channels that were giving advice about heat pumps, and so I used that referral code. They advised me via email that it would be taken into account at the end of the process, so it wouldn't be taken off of this quotation that I had seen, but at the end of the process I would have £100 removed as part of that referral. And so I was happy to proceed and paid the £200 deposit, and this was around about the, I think, 19th of December. So the process from getting the initial quotation going through is about 3 days, and obviously it was in the run-up to Christmas, so I wasn't expecting a huge amount of movement, but I did get a phone call from them on the 20th of December, so the next day, to arrange the date for a surveyor to come and to check the property. So that was good to get that in place, and that was booked in for the 14th of January. So obviously it was coming up to the festive period, so there would have been some shutdown. So it was a couple of weeks into January when that was booked in. The surveyor was going to be coming in the morning, and it was going to take approximately 3 hours to do the survey. We'd been asked to make sure that there was adequate access in the rooms for them to look around, so they'd need to check things like where the heat pump might go, have a look at the water tank, check up in the loft, look at the radiators, measure the rooms to get an idea for whether the radiators were big enough for the heat output that would be needed in those rooms. There were lots of calculations that were going to be taken on this day. Before that, this was on the 6th of January, so just over a week before that, we got an email that was talking about the upcoming survey. So it was a reminder and giving us a little bit of a rundown as to the kind of things that would be happening, what they would be doing about taking the measurements and giving them access to the property for 2 to 3 hours, and that they'd need access to the water cylinders, loft space, and all those kind of things. So that was good to get that timely reminder. Then there was the day of the survey itself. So that was on the 14th of January. A nice guy that came and did the survey. I was asking questions whilst he was going around, but also leaving him in peace to do the measurements and the like. And he got everything that he needed, had access up in the loft to look there. We had a chat about potential locations for the heat pump, and he sort of talked me through a couple of locations outside and the pros and cons of those. And we agreed on a location that would be best. Now, this was to be located outside the kitchen window against the fence. It would be out of the way. There would be the possibility to run the electrics from there easily around the side of the house to the electricity supply at the side of the house. And then the tubes for the water run, both to the water tank and back, were going up the side of the house directly into the loft space and then along the loft space and down to the water tank. So the run should be relatively straightforward according to the surveyor. Also talked about the potential locations for the controllers that would be located around, so the temperature sensors that were going to be triggering the devices to run, and just answered a number of general questions that I had. And he was filling it in on his sort of like fancy iPad kind of device that he was putting all the information in on. Now, it was a couple of days after this that I got an email that was a post-survey feedback email. So basically asking me whether I felt it was great, nah, or not great. I mean, everything was good, so that was fine. Quite happy to click great, but good to know that they are after feedback straight away. The following day, so this was the 17th of January, there was a confirmation email coming through that we would be able to proceed. So from all the work that had been done, there was good news, and it included a link to download an install pack once I'd signed the relative details through DocuSign to acknowledge it. That was issued via DocuSign, so we're able to look through the install pack, and it wanted us to sign up and agree with that. I found that a little bit hard to get through that document just on screen with how it was. So I asked for the PDF version to be sent to me so that I could have a read through, check everything before signing, and they were happy to do that. So that was good. They're very supportive throughout the process. I had a read through and it seemed okay, but I wasn't sure about the running costs compared to the existing gas usage that we had, and the fact that we were on an agile tariff at the time. So it gave me a couple of examples of potential running costs based on slightly different scenarios. One was looking at a potential saving around about £40 over the year, and the other one was £174 saving over that time. Now, the two scenarios, one was based on the current electricity and gas rates, so that was with no off-peak tariff rates applied, and then the other one had using off-peak tariff rates applied. So this was because Octopus offer different rates on some of their schemes where you're using things like a heat pump, where they'll have reduced costs at certain times of the day when there's less demand, to basically enable you to use the heat pump and those sort of kind of times. And then there was a peak cost later on, which is much more expensive when there's going to be more load. But we were on Octopus Intelligent Go tariff by that time, and this is where we get really cheap electricity from 11:30 at night through to 5:30 in the morning, because we've got a car and a charger that are able to communicate with Octopus and take advantage of the Intelligent Go tariff. And that means that they can basically choose when to put the electricity in the car when it's appropriate from a carbon intensity point of view during those times. And it means we get it at 7 pence per unit, or we were at the time, as opposed to, I think daytime it was around about 27 pence, roughly 28 pence, that kind of thing. I wasn't overly convinced by those figures. I did my own calculations on if we were able to sort of shift more electricity usage between those times, and I felt that after doing that, it might be possible, to make a bit of a saving, but that wasn't really the main motivation behind doing this. The motivation was to make sure that we were off gas. We did spot that there was an issue with the original assessment that had come through, in that the room that I'm in now is actually marked on the plans as a bedroom, but it is an office room. In the plans, it had been marked down temperature-wise, because it being a bedroom, they don't need to be quite as high temperature rating. Whereas if it's an occupied room during the day, then it would need potentially larger radiator, and that proved to be the case. They redid the calculations, worked out that it would also need a radiator upgrade in this room, as well as, I think there were 4 others that had been calculated. There was one in the hallway, one in the dining room, there was one in the ensuite bathroom, and one in another bedroom that would all need to be upgraded based on the fact that they were too small currently to heat that room with the lower flow temperature going through. And it didn't make any difference to the cost. So we were able to sign that agreement and sent it back to them. And that was round about, I think it was about the 27th of January. After that was done, the next day we got an email with our own personal referral code, so that we would get some money, and that people using the referral code would also get money. So please, if you are proceeding, then please do consider using our referral code. If you found this video useful, that would be much appreciated. Within a couple of days, so the 29th of January, we got an email from the heat pump install coordinator introducing themselves and saying that we're going to be supporting the heat pump journey for us, saying that there were some activities that had to happen in the background that they were going to be looking at. And it listed a few of those that were going to be looked through. So did we need much to be done? No. We did have to wait for approval from the DNO, the distribution network operator, so the people responsible for the electricity network in our area, and they had to approve the fact that we were going to be having this additional load on the system. They were hoping that that was going to happen within sort of the next couple of weeks, and they were going to be chasing up the DNO if that wasn't going to happen. And also Octopus were going to claim the BUS, the Boiler Upgrade Scheme grant on our behalf. So that would be for a voucher for £7,500 from the government to contribute towards the cost of getting the heat pump installed, on the provision that a gas boiler was removed from the property and taken out of service. Now, they could claim for this around 1 to 2 months before the installation, to make sure that the voucher wasn't going to expire before the installation. So that was going to have to be timed depending on when the installation was actually going to happen. And they warned that we would have to keep an eye out for that email, because we would have to approve for Octopus to claim on our behalf. And we're also going to be receiving a HEIS workmanship warranty, and that is purchased to protect customers from any companies that might cease trading during the warranty period of the product. And that insurance was going to be sent to us directly from the insurer once the installation had taken place. So that all came through towards the end of January. And next up was the HEIS consumer code information that came directly from them, telling us about the fact that Octopus Energy Services are a member of the scheme and have registered our details with them, and that kind of thing. So that came through. It was a two-stage process when we had to validate who we were before we could be sent those details. So that involved going to a link and then getting that through the email to be able to respond, so that we could confirm that it was us. I had previously sought assurances on the recycling of the equipment that was going to be coming out from the property. Now, it took a little while for them to be able to find out the information. I think that most people don't usually care what's happening with the stuff, so they weren't particularly aware of that and had to chase up internally to find out. So they did say that we could keep hold of the boiler yourself to sell or give on to someone you know. Actually, that's not correct, in that the boiler had to be decommissioned to be valid for the grant from the government. So that information wasn't correct. But the water tank could have been kept and recycled or passed on. Same as the radiators as well. Those could have been kept and passed on. They did say that they use a company called Clearabee for their waste removal post-install, and gave me details to look at that. Yeah, so it wasn't hugely reassuring, but we were some way through the process now, and Mrs. G3 and I chatted, and we didn't want to have the hassle of trying to keep the water tank and selling it on to somebody, or the radiators. We didn't want to be taking up space with that, so we made the decision to proceed with it as it was, on the understanding that at least we were freeing ourselves from having that connection to gas and needing gas, and so that at least it was a positive step in the right direction, even if we were going to have to get rid of some equipment that wasn't that old, that was going to go to be recycled. There was also a question around whether the property would need to be unlooped. Now, I think this is with some new properties that the electricity to them can be linked in some way, but to be able to have sufficient power to run the heat pump as well as the normal household electricity, we would need to make sure that we had a connection of our own and were unlooped. As it turns out, that wasn't the case. We weren't connected to another property anyway, so there was no problem there. But Octopus did check with the DNO to make sure that that was okay. So following on from that, I acknowledged to Octopus that we'd be happy to go ahead and could get a date in place. Now, this was all around the 4th of March that we were having this conversation. And what they would need would be a list of dates to pass on to the scheduling team, because it wasn't the same person that was going to be dealing with the booking of the dates that they were going to be coming. So yeah, it was a little convoluted. So I emailed through a number of dates, and I said that they were in my order of preference. I gave them 3 dates, the one being the furthest away in time because it was going to be warmer. There wouldn't be any problems with if the doors were going to need to be left open while they were working and they're having a cold house. I also had to look at dates when Mrs. G3 wasn't going to be on night shifts and sleeping during the daytime, so we had to make sure that that was going to be okay. So they were passed on to the team, and this was happening around about early March. And surprise, surprise, once those dates were given, Octopus chose my least preferred date, which happened to be the one that was nearest in time. And I suspected that that was because it was preferable for them, because they wanted to get on with it and would rather get the business happening sooner. So I got back in touch and pointed out that they were in my order of preferred dates, and that could he double check that it wasn't just that they'd selected the first available date. And he confirmed actually that's what had happened by the automated process, and so he went in and changed it so that it was the date that was furthest away, which meant that it was going to be more favourable from a weather point of view. Don't just rely on the email that comes through with those dates. If it comes back with a date that isn't suitable for you, then reach out and let them know, because yeah, it's a bit of an automated process. So this was going to be very early June when they were going to be starting it, the week beginning the 2nd of June. So in the confirmation email that we got about that, they were saying obviously they were happy to confirm the installation booked, and said that if we're able to take delivery of the equipment before installation, then it would be delivered the week prior to the install. We haven't had any conversation about that, so that was a surprise at that point. And said that we would be getting a call from the engineers beforehand to let us know what time that they would be arriving, and that it would take 3 to 5 days generally, depending on the complexity of the job. And there was a link to a PDF that had more information if we needed any more information. I did get back to them and say that we hadn't had any conversation about the delivery of the equipment. So because we hadn't had that conversation, I assume that they're going to deliver it on the day of the installation, because I wanted to be clear that I didn't expect equipment to turn up a week before, because we would have trouble finding storage for it. And so they responded to that to say it's not a problem, and that's going to be arranged nearer the time with logistics. So I guess that's a little bit confusing in the process there. And Octopus was saying if that conversation has happened, then this will occur. But it appears that that isn't a conversation that would naturally happen at that point. Logistics gets talked about at a later stage. So yeah, it was a little bit confusing. This was all around about the 10th of March from recollection. So that was fine. Things were just ticking along in the background. DNOs were being notified. Grants were being applied for. And in the meantime, I thought, why don't I also investigate what it would cost to get solar panels installed? Because I thought if there was going to be some upheaval, that might be the time to also look at that. So we went through Octopus and another provider, but we went through Octopus to get a solar quote made. There are some benefits to going for a solar quote with Octopus as well as the heat pump, because there was a 10% discount if you had a heat pump. So we went through that process. I won't bore you with all the details of the solar, but the reason for talking about this is that with proceeding with the solar, and we've actually opted to go with battery storage instead of solar. We're not getting solar. It wasn't cost effective. But a battery storage solution was, because from my calculations, the payoff was about 6 to 7 years in savings, because we can make use of that really cheap overnight electricity to top up the battery as well as charging the car. and then we will be able to use a chunk of power during the day that is a lot cheaper. And that will be pretty much what we need for the heat pump, I believe, during that time. We may well look at changing the tariff we're on in the future, but at the moment that seemed to work quite well by using the battery to offset some of the cost of the heat pump. Through this process, there's been communications with initially the solar team, and I wanted to know whether we would need to get the battery installed before then, after then, at the same time. What was going to be the impact? What was the best time to get the battery installed so that it made the least impact on either of those when that they were going to be installing it? I'd first asked about this at the end of March. The questions hadn't really been sufficiently answered by the end of April, despite another call. So I reached out to the heat pump team in early May to basically ask them directly. So I was saying that I plan to have the battery installed. It's a Tesla Powerwall, and what would be the implications on location, timing, just asking from their point of view and asking if they could have a conversation with the solar team to look at this. And I did highlight the fact that I was disappointed with the communication between the teams to get the answers about what was good. I didn't mind what was happening. I just wanted them to tell me what was the best process about when the battery should be fitted, whether it would be beneficial to have it in place before the heat pump was installed, at the same time, afterwards, what was the best scenario. And neither team particularly knew individually, and they hadn't talked particularly well to sort of basically ease that process. But the heat pump team did. They reached out, had that conversation. It wouldn't matter either way. That having the solar in place first would probably be the best scenario. But as it turns out, we were waiting for DNO approval to have the battery installed anyway. That still hadn't been given. And so it wasn't going to impact when the heat pump was going in. The battery would have to be done at a later stage. And I would just have to have a conversation with the installation team just to ask them about siting of it and knock-on implications and that kind of thing. So we got to the bottom of it, but it did take a while to get to that point, which was a little frustrating. During this time, so it was early April, 2nd of April, I got an email to let me know that Octopus were applying for the boiler upgrade scheme voucher because there was that 2-month period before the installation was going to happen. So I just had to look out for an email from Ofgem so that I could grant my consent for them to apply on my behalf. That email came within a week from Ofgem. It was about 6 days later on the 8th. And they wanted to confirm that I was the property owner, that I consented to the application, and that I'm eligible for the scheme. It gave me a cut-off point when I had to complete the notification by. So that was approximately about 2 weeks, I think, from recollection. And I had to say that I was happy for Octopus to do it on my behalf. Yeah, that was all good. It's going to take a couple of minutes. Next thing that happened, which was on the 28th of April, was that I got a email about the materials delivery survey. So this was the equipment that was going to be delivered ready to be fitted. So the heat pump, the radiators, the water tank, all of that. And so it sent out via email a survey to fill in as to whether you have space to be able to receive it. There were loads of questions asked around eligibility to have that delivery in advance. I wanted to talk to somebody about this. I didn't want to be filling in a form online because I wanted to ask whether there were people that would be able to help move that, or whether it would just be dumped in our driveway and sort of block cars parking. I wanted to be able to actually speak to somebody about that so that I could give my approval. And unfortunately, it was just a form. There was no other way of going through this. So I chose to say that no, we weren't able to take delivery of the equipment in advance. That was one of the things that could be said through the survey. Whereas we probably could have done, we needed a little bit of logistics on where we were going to store things and assistance to get that stored. But there were no guarantees on that. So I had to say that we weren't able to take that in advance, which meant they were going to have to deliver it on the day, which could potentially delay things. The next thing to happen was pretty much around on the same day, the 28th of April, and this was an email from Ofgem saying that they've approved Octopus Energy Services Limited boiler upgrade scheme application. And so we had a voucher ID towards that. It was a couple of months validity, which covered the period when our heat pump was going to be fitted. So it then was down to Octopus to use that when it came to working out the costs at the end of the process. Approximately a week before the install, so this was the 27th of May, we got an email telling us about the Cozy Octopus tariff that's especially designed for houses with heat pumps. And so it's giving some more information about that to see whether that was useful. And also on the same day, we got an email, a reminder that a metering appointment was booked for the 3rd of June, so the second day. And this was to read and cap off the meter, the gas meter, once the boiler had been removed. So that was basically decommissioning, taking the gas out of service. And we had an email on the 30th of May, so this is just a few days before, and it was from the leader of the team saying that he wasn't going to be there on the Monday, but the install team were going to be looking after everything, and that all the materials are going to be delivered on day one, that the install team were going to arrive between about 8 and 10 in the morning, wanting to make sure that all the pathways were clear for the equipment to go to where it needed to go, and all those kind of things. And then we had another email which came through on the 1st of June, so the day before the appointment, to let us know about the appointment for the meter to be removed. So it was a reminder of that. We'd only had one a few days before, but it was a follow-up just beforehand to let us know that that appointment was going to happen. So that was everything that we had in the process, in the build-up to getting the heat pump installed. I hope that helps, giving you an idea of the timeline. So it was quite a convoluted thing. Initially, from the first quote, it was about a year, but from the second quote that we went through, it was around about 7 months in total, but that was because we had slowed down the process by several months to make sure that it was done at a time that was going to be appropriate for us. So that was entirely in our time frame. But there were lots of steps of things needing to be checked. We had an initial issue where they had got one of the room uses wrong, where it was an office room rather than the bedroom. We had the issues with the installation of the battery separately, and that there wasn't clear communication between the solar team and the heat pump team. We also had the complications during the process of trying to find out about the recycling of these products. And it wasn't a particularly satisfactory answer that we got back, even though the radiators were going to be perfectly usable in the right house. I suspect that those were probably going to go away for metal recycling, and that was a disappointment. So I hope that was helpful. Please, if you've got any questions or comments, then leave them down below. Happy to answer them as best as I can. I will be creating further videos on what happens on day 1, 2, 3, and 4 of our install, because obviously we've got the heat pump in place. Spoiler alert, really good, but we will be going through that process as well, and I will edit those videos at some point soon. But leave your comments, ask away any questions. Please click the like button if you found this video useful. It will really help out my channel. Also, if you haven't done so already, then why not subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you get notified when I load up a new video. Up next, I've got this video that you might find useful. So yeah, watch away, subscribe to the channel, and keep your eyes peeled for those next videos, the install videos that are going to come up. Until then, have a good day. See you soon. Bye.